experience. Most festival events this weekend are free of charge, but they are not free to produce. So your support does help us keep this incredible event going year after year. If you'd like to support the festival, you can give using one of the QR codes that you'll see them all around, or they're also in the back of your brochure. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I'm usually loud. So speaking of support, I would like to give a special thanks to Virginia Festival of the Book's premier sponsor, Michelle and David Baldacci, who helped make this event possible. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone to silence your cell phones.
Yeah, so true.
Especially the authors. I should check mine. Also, be aware of your space, take a look around, and note all available exits. In the case of an emergency, our site coordinator is back right here. Our site coordinator is on hand to provide us some assistance. And as always, if you see something, say something. At the conclusion of this panel, there is a bookseller over in this corner here who has copies of all of our authors' latest books, and I do encourage you to buy them and come up here and get them signed. So purchasing a book is a great way to support our authors, and as an added bonus, you can get them personalized and signed today. So finally, I would like to note that festival authors and speakers represent themselves. They do not represent Virginia Humanities or the University of Virginia. And now I am delighted to introduce our panel. We have Colleen Cambridge, we have John Copenhaver, and we have Katharine Schellman. So start with Colleen.
Sure.
Colleen is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of the American in Paris Mysteries. Jesse's right here.
That's not them.
No?
That's okay.
Oh.
I mean, you're welcome
No,
to show the cover.
these are the Phillida Bright.
Right.
The Phillida Bright Mysteries. Thank you. An accomplished historian who meticulously researched novels that appealed to fans of historical fiction and mysteries alike, she also writes under the pen names C.M. Gleason and Colleen Gleason, and she lives in the Midwest. I'd like to also introduce John. He is an award-winning author. In fact, we've got some breaking news. He just won the Lefty Award for Best Historical Mystery. Like last weekend,
you.
Right?
Yeah, last weekend.
So, an award-winning author whose latest novel is Hall of Mirrors. It was named a New York Times Crime Novel of the Year. His debut, Dodging and Burning, won the McCarthy Award and the Literary Award. A founding member of the Queer Crime Writers, he teaches at Virginia Commonwealth University, mentors at the University of Nebraska MFA program, and lives in Richmond with his husband, artist Jeffrey Paul Harity. And I would also like to introduce Katharine. So Katharine has given me a brand new bio because she has won so many awards lately. So many awards. Katharine Schellman is an award-winning author of historical crime fiction, including the Nightingale Mysteries and the Lily Adler Mysteries. Her novels, which reviewers have called worthy of Rick Stout or Agatha Christie, have been named one of Suspense Magazine's best books of the year, a Library Journal Best Crime Fiction of the Year, and a New York Times Editor's Pick. Her work has been nominated for the Silver Falchion Award from Killer Nashville and won the Zibby Media National Book Award for Best Book for the History Lover. A former actor, one-time political consultant, and a graduate of William and Mary, Katharine lives and writes in the mountains of Virginia with her husband, children, and many houseplants that she accidentally keeps murdering. As long as you're only murdering houseplants, we know this is a mystery panel.
That's all I'll admit to.
A little bit of all. So Colleen, I would like you to take a minute and introduce your book. So in Murder Takes the Stage, Phillida Bright is employed as Agatha Christie's housekeeper. And she finds herself in 1930s London, where she gets embroiled in a series of murders involving the London theater scene. Can you tell us a little bit about Murder Takes the Stage?
I'd love to, thank you. So Phillida Bright is Agatha Christie's obviously fictional housekeeper. And Murder Takes the Stage is actually the 4th book in the series, but don't let that scare you off. It's easily read as a standalone. Yes, as Olivia said, Phillida and, well, Agatha Christie Mallowan brings Phillida and other members of the household staff to London, and while they're there, a man named Archibald, oh shoot, I forgot his name.
You're writing so many books you can't keep
Alston, Archibald Alston is found dead. He's found asleep in an armchair at the Adelphi Theater. Any idea where this might be going? And so they don't know if it was, foul play, or whether he actually just, died in the armchair. But then the next day, Benvolio is found with his head bashed in on the balcony at the Belmont Theater, okay? This book is an homage to Christie's The ABC Murders, in case you didn't catch that. It's not a rewrite of the ABC Murders, it's an homage to it. It was inspired by the ABC Murders, as are all of the books in this series. Each book of the series, and the 5th one comes out at the end of October, are all homages to Christie. There's a lot of Agatha Christie Easter eggs in it, and they're all your quintessential 1930s British sort of mystery series. Phillida Bright is the housekeeper, and she does not suffer fools gladly. She's about the same age as Agatha, and they, were friends at the hospital in World War I when Agatha was learning all about poisons. They got to be good friends, and so that's the setup for the series. But this particular book takes place in London, and it's all about the theater, the world of theater. Olivia did also mention the An American in Paris mysteries, and even though we don't have any here, I just wanted to give you a 2-second pitch about it. It's the same idea. I have an amateur detective. My amateur detective in that series is a former Rosie the Riveter who moves to Paris to live with her grandfather and his partner after the Second World War. And she meets another American expat whose name happens to be Julia Child. And one day they find a dead body in Julia Child's apartment building with Julia Child's bloody chef's knife next to it. Spoiler alert, Julia Child did not murder anybody.
Oh, come on.
And I always have to make sure I say that because the Julia Child Foundation would not be happy if anybody thought she was a murderer. Anyway, those are the 2 mystery series that I write. It's a famous person as a sidekick with a fictional amateur detective.
So, John Copenhaver in Hall of Mirrors, you've got 2 same-sex interracial couples during the McCarthy-era witch hunts that are hunting a serial killer with some very powerful connections through D.C. and Virginia, and I believe a couple of the scenes take place right here in Charlottesville.
Yeah, yes, they do. Yeah.
Yes. So it's very
no
local.
Murderers.
And pretty much every reference that you have in here, I was like, oh, I've been there. So
yeah, sorry.
that's a lot of that's a lot of
welcome.
fun. I like that. Would you tell us a little bit about Hall of Mirrors?
Sure. So just to give you a little context for Hall of Mirrors, it's the 2nd book in a trilogy. The first is The Savage Kind, and they can be read out of order. I designed them that way. But the Savage Kind deals with these 2 teenage girls in 1948 D.C. who find each other, and they're really a sort of a circumstance where their opposites attract. Judy is very much like the iconoclastic, bad girl, and Philippa is she thinks she's a good girl, but she probably isn't. And they get wrapped up in a case for that mystery having to do with their and I was a high school English teacher for many years, so I did some pretty first-hand research on that one. But so I wanted to pursue their journey through 3 books, 1950s for Hall of Mirrors, and then 1963 for the final one, which I'm currently working on. The Hall of Mirrors takes them into the McCarthy era in Washington, D.C., which, as a subset of the McCarthy era, was a time called the Lavender Scare, or a subset, I should say, of this Red Scare. It was the Lavender Scare, where gay men and women were booted from the State Department and other government agencies because of their sexuality. The thought was that because of their sexuality, they could be blackmailed for state secrets. Of course, this was really a tool by McCarthy and friends to leverage fear against a minority and build their political point of view and their political power, which today sounds particularly familiar, scarily familiar. Yes, sadly. And so I did not know that was going to happen. But I am fascinated by Judy and Philippa meet their favorite crime writer named Ray Kane. Ray Kane writes these hard-boiled detective novels that were very popular in the 30s and 40s, and still popular. But Ray Kane is actually a writing duo, Roger and Lionel, and they're a mixed-race gay couple. Not at all the image that they're presenting outwardly to the world. And Roger works for the State Department, and the book opens, and Roger has died in a fire in their apartment. And of course, as you can imagine, it's suspicious. And Lionel and the two young women work together to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, there's a serial killer that started in, they became aware of him in the Savage Kind, but he is back. And they have decided that he must go down. So, and as mysteries go, you can imagine there's some reasons, there's some connections there.
So, Katharine Schellman, you also write 2 historical mystery series. The one that we are here for today, The Last Note of Warning, is the latest, but not the last, because we got some more coming out this summer. In the Nightingale Mysteries, it takes place in Prohibition era New York City, where Vivian Kelly works for a dressmaker during the day and a speakeasy at night. And still somehow she finds time to find a dead body or 2.
Several, yes.
How? So can you tell us a little bit more about The Last Note of Warning?
I would love to. So Vivian Kelly, the protagonist in this series, is a working class young woman who lives in New York City in the 1920s. And as Olivia mentioned, she works for a dressmaker during the day, which she thinks of as her safe job because she works at a speakeasy at night. But unfortunately, she's delivering a dress to a wealthy client and is discovered with the murdered body of the client's husband by accident. And because she is a working class woman, because she is an orphan with no family connections or family at all to protect or support her, it's very easy for the police and the press to pin that crime on her. So she is at very high risk of going to jail and then most likely being executed for murder if she cannot find who actually committed the crime. So because it is that wealthy, well-to-do world that is threatening her, she turns to her speakeasy connections, the various criminals and bootleggers and people with inside information there. And they're the ones that she has to rely on to help her figure out how to escape having a murder that she didn't commit pinned on her.
So whenever I was reading Hall of Mirrors, a line jumped out at me that I'd like to read for y'all real quick. It's mystery writers, I've found, love to get up in front of polite audiences and talk about things like strychnine poison and vivisection and the electric chair. So given that the 3 of you are some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life, what drives y'all to actually want to write about murder? And John, since I quoted you, let's...
I guess I have to answer first. I have to answer for that quote. I think there's 2 answers to it. One is why do you want to write about and think about murder, this destruction of another person. And I think for me, I don't really understand why people murder, and I mean that real in a core way. And so I think I write to try to figure that out, what motivates people to do that. I think that's why sort of psychologically, I'm very interested in the psychology of that. And I think we don't always understand, we see a murder and we don't always understand all the sort of force of history, so to speak, personal and otherwise, that went behind bringing that crime to that point. We have one person doing a bad thing, but sometimes we have to understand why that person, what social circumstance that person's coming from to bring them to that point of doing that bad thing. And so I'm very interested in that. I really like mysteries, the solving of crime, because there's something about trying to sort out the mess of life that we don't get to sort out in real life often. That you can, at least to a certain degree, in fiction. And so I think there's something very satisfying about that. I'm very careful with it, though, because I do think my books have some purposeful, some things, questions left open, and some of that's to draw you into the next book. But I think that there's also a need to sort of sort it out and make sense of this mess of, violent acts.
I think there's a lot to that. There's so much in the world that is very messy and unsatisfying, and bad things happening that will never have any consequences attached to them. And it's really cathartic to write something and explore something where something terrible has happened, but you can bring a resolution to it. You can create some sense of justice that maybe isn't always there in the real world. And I think there's also a little bit relating to your other point that when you're looking at something like a murder, that's like the highest level of emotion that you can get to, like something that has driven someone to do something so awful or so spontaneous or so passionate, or depending on the reason for the crime. And I think there's something there's something really appealing about having a chance to explore, that level of intensity, that level of emotion, and seeing that, because you're diving into this really intense human feeling and looking at it in sort of its most extreme iteration. And I think writers really enjoy exploring emotion, and that's about as much of it as you can get.
Yeah.
I love going last because everybody said all these brilliant things, and I can say, yeah, me too. But I do think one of the reasons, I grew up inhaling, Nancy Drew, Trixie Bell, and Agatha Christie. There's this whole sense of, as both of you said, this resolution that we don't get in our real lives. Also, for me, I really enjoy the sort of the building of the puzzle pieces, the science or lack of science, the process of making a mystery, like making up the clues and the suspects and all those interactions. And again, knowing that at the end of the day, we're going to have an answer and justice will be served somehow.
Well, since Colleen likes to go last, we're going to put her on the spot here. So, Colleen, out of these three books, you have the most traditional of the books, of all of these mysteries. And out of all of the mystery tropes that we all love, the smoking gun, the locked room, what is your favorite mystery trope?
Well, see, mine's, oh, there it is, it went away. So if I tell you that, I might give away the plot for my next book, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I love, I really like them all, and I do, when I start with a mystery, when I start, a new book in a series, I always start with the body being found where and how. Like I said, Julia Child's chef's knife next to it. In the first Fill It a Bright book, it was a body found in Agatha Christie's own library. You can see where I was going with that. But I literally just lost my train of thought. So, the tropes. So once I figure out the body and the location, then I'm going to think about which of the tropes. I think one of my favorites is the fake alibi, where you're sure this person could not have done it, but later on you find out they did because they faked an alibi. Or the absolute least obvious, or the person that just could never have done it, not just because of the alibi, but because of lack of skill or opportunity or whatever. So those are probably some of my favorites, but that's not to give you any hint about any of my books that are coming out.
So, this is a hard question because I love the tropes, right? There's so many, they're so fun, and in growing up reading all these mysteries, I think probably my favorite is a relationship that looks one way in the beginning and you realize you've totally misread what that relationship is. I love it. I think the classic example of that would be like Death in the Nile, where you think there's a certain there's a honeymooning couple being terrorized by a jilted lover, and boy, are you wrong. That's not at all what's going on. And so I think that's I love that sort of, okay, we think it's this, and then it shifts, and the whole world of this story turns on that shift. But you don't see it until you have a brilliant writer like Agatha Christie and others that are able to trick you that way. And it's so obvious. It's like, of course, that's what's going on. So I love that moment. I think as a reader, I love that moment of that shift. So as a writer, I would want to try to create those moments.
It is really hard to pick just one. I think that's one of the reasons mystery writers write so many books, because you're like, okay, I've written that trope. Now what's the next one I want to do? Oh gosh, I think A Locked Room, An Impossible Crime is probably one of my favorites. I did one of those in my other series. This one actually does one of my favorite tropes, which is the amateur sleuth is the one who is the suspect and has to prove their own innocence. And it's usually a lot harder to prove your own innocence than someone else's. So that's really fun to play with. But I think there's something really satisfying about, when you're starting to figure out a book, you pick your trope and you decide whether you're going to lean into it or subvert it. And that's always a really exciting thing to explore. And luckily there's a lot of them out there for us to pick from.
So you actually led right into my next question, so thank you very much for that. So one of the challenge of writing a mystery series is trying to keep it fresh and to find a way to insert your character believably into the mystery. So John, each of your characters does have a very personal motivation. Colleen, Miss Bright, is hired to solve the murder, so that helps a little. And Katharine, your main character actually has blood on her. Your main character actually has blood on her hands. So, starting with Katharine, as your series progresses, how do you keep your main character invested in all of these murders?
First of all, I think it's important to note that there is a lot of suspension of disbelief involved in mystery series, because no one would spend any time with these characters in real life. It's like no one would ever go on vacation with Miss Marple. Like, your odds of dying are very high. So, you have to just be willing to accept that this person discovers an inordinate number of dead bodies. But I think a lot of it comes down to relationships, because there has, the idea that someone would look at a crime that has happened, look at a murder that happened and think, I have to get involved in that. That is not a normal reaction. Most of us would run in the opposite direction, unless someone that we had a very intense relationship with was involved or threatened or had some connection to it. And so for me, I think having those relationships developed, especially over the course of a series, and saying, both you, the sleuth, and you, the reader, know this person who is implicated or involved or threatened this time, and therefore you're going to buy into the fact that, yes, there is another dead body and we're along for this ride again.
So,
exactly everything you said, but also, usually the first book in the series is generally, the main character is completely involved for whatever reason. But by the time it moves on, in this book in particular, the fourth book, Phillida Bright has had a reputation for finding dead bodies and helping them to be solved, the mysteries to be solved. And so someone does come to her and say, I want you to help in this situation. So once we get well enough into the series, that kind of thing can happen and can make sense. I do want to mention one other thing, and that is when I first started working on this series with Phillida Bright as the housekeeper and having all this time to go around and solve murders, I had to do the research and justify for myself, would that be possible? Because she's running a huge household, fictional household, in England. And actually, as it turns out, a housekeeper who is like Phillida and very organized and very efficient and has a very good staff actually has a lot of downtime. So she would have time to go around and interview suspects and look at clues and get drawn into things. So I had to justify that for myself. Like if she was a cook, there's not any way she's getting out of the kitchen to go, investigate this stuff. I mean, she's just not. So
I kind of do something a little different. My characters themselves are suspicious. So my crime solvers are also perhaps criminals. The first book in the series, The Savage Kind, opens with one of these two young women, looking back retrospectively and telling you that the diary entries that the story unfolds through have been curated by one of the girls, but she refuses to tell you which one. And she also says some of it may be made up. And this is kind of the tension through that and through Hall of Mirrors. Judy and Philip are both interested in solving crime. They're interested in agency themselves, being both young women. Judy's bisexual, and Philippa's lesbian. They're interested in agency in their world, particularly in the 1950s, late 40s. Like being able to be themselves in that environment is very difficult and requires them to transgress. So they are definitely against anything that might be, quashing that. And sometimes that means solving a crime. Sometimes it may mean committing one, depending on who's on the other side of that. And so Hall of Mirrors, Lionel and Roger are more like, Roger, of course, is the focus of he's the victim in this case, but Lionel is much more of a straightforward, trying to figure out what happened to his beloved lover who's dead. And of course, part of the mystery is that in fact, Roger, that burned in that fire. So I think that I'm kind of playing with the trope a little bit. I'm like not saying, there's not an easy side to be on in this case. You have to be alert. You might these characters might be lying to you at times, so watch out.
Well, speaking of the characters that lie to you, so Hall of Mirrors jumps around between multiple points of view. It time hops back and forward. All the time the readers think that they're reading one story, and it turns out they're reading something completely different, which is what you were describing earlier as well. So all three of these books come together just miraculously at the ending, and it's this great, everything makes sense. So from a point of view of when you're writing, how do you manage that? How do you keep track of what's going on and what you want to see? And if you have a murder board in your basement, you can tell us about that too.
Sure, I'll start. Yeah, I do this to myself. Every single one of my books have like dual timelines, multiple perspectives. There's always a murder, which is not an uncomplicated thing to plot. And I think I do it like for a very philosophical reason. I want more than one point of view because I want more than one perspective on an event. I really think that historically we kind of experience life this way. There's not one true interpretation. There's just several different interpretations. And I also like the sort of tension between a retrospective, how do we misremember the past? How do we sort of want to shape it? And so I think that to keep track of all that, I use this great program called Scrivener, which is just magic. Like my first novel, Dodging and Burning, it was just on Word, and once I got Scrivener. But Scrivener basically allows you to have a digital corkboard, and allows you to arrange chapters easily, so you can sort of see the whole thing. I'm not like posting all that. Oh, louder. Sorry. So I'm not posting all that, on my office walls or something.
I use Scrivener too, but I do not use. Hello?
Yeah. It keeps on dying.
I think I just have to put my mouth really close to it. Yeah, it's really. Okay, I'm just gonna. Can you hear me? Can you hear me in the back? Okay, I'm just gonna shout because no. I don't use the corkboard on Scrivener because I don't plot my books out. I don't recommend it as a mystery writer, but I write my books as if I'm the reader. I write my books as if I'm the amateur detective. So my amateur detective walks in a room, looks around for clues, and a clue shows up. I have no idea what it means at that point in time. I write one draft, and as I write it, I massage it into place. I'm constantly tweaking, changing, fixing. So that's the process, and I don't plan things out.
I want to add that because I went on a journey with all that. Like my early books, I didn't plan, and then Hall of Mirrors, I had a plan, and it was wonderful.
Oh,
it was
you know
amazing.
what? I've tried. I've written 61 full-length novels, and I've never plotted one of them out.
Hey, if it works for you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I tried. I tried once to plot it out, and it's no fun because I'm writing it as if I'm the reader, and if I already know where I'm going, I'm gonna be bored.
And Katharine, you're working on 2 books at the same time from 2 different series. How do you keep this straight?
Well, they're fortunately set in 2 very different eras. My other series, the Lily Adler Mysteries, is set in Regency England, so it's It's like your favorite BBC period drama, but if instead of everyone trying to get married, they're trying to not get murdered. So the tone of the two is very different, which makes it pretty easy to keep them straight. But I think I'm kind of halfway in between you two. I'm very boring. I use Word, and I make myself a big outline that's usually somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 words. So that outline is kind of my first draft. Like I use that to discover the story as I'm planning it out. And that way I can go back and say like, oh, this needs, I've discovered that this is happening now, which means I need to go back to the, 200 words ago and put this in, rather than saying like, oh no, I need to rewrite 20,000 words. So I did start, like John, I did my first mystery. I did not outline. I just wrote and kept writing, and I ended up with, I think, so the total word count was 145,000 words, which, if you know books, is about a book and a half. Yeah. So I had to do a lot of cutting from that one. And that eventually became the first Lily Adler mystery, The Body in the Garden. And since then I've outlined, because I like, when I sit down to write, I tend to have very limited windows of time for writing. I also have young children. I have a day job that I do. So I like to know that, like, okay, this is what I'm writing at this point, and I'm going to use that time well. But I tend to do my discovery when I'm outlining first. Although I do love physical note cards. I love to put all my scenes on physical note cards once I've got them figured out, and then shuffle them around to make sure things are actually happening in the correct order. So I have all these little packets for each book.
Can I jump in, because I want to ask my fellow authors, and you too, Olivia, because I know you write too. So every author I've ever talked to, there's a point in the book where it's crap. It's trash. Yes. They hate it. Oh my God, we're saying. So I was just talking to somebody a while ago, and she was saying that like her first 100 words, oh my God, it's crap, it's trash, and she'd get to the 100 words and then she'd be fine. For me, it's like I'm about 2/3, 3/4 of the way in, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? So I'm just curious for you all, do you have that point where you're like, this is terrible, how am I going to fix this? Oh my God.
Well, for me, it's usually when the editor sends back the draft and says, what?
That's what I was going to say. You stole my answer.
Sorry, that's when I know it's crap.
Gosh, I wish I wrote that way, because I'm 3/4 of the way through a book right now, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm just asking for sympathy. That's really all I'm asking for right now.
I think mine is usually somewhere around the midpoint. And you're right, it's every single time. It doesn't matter how well you've planned the book, or how excited you are to write it, or how many books you've written. At some point you will be writing it and think, this is the worst thing anyone has ever written in the world.
And I don't know how I'm going to fix it, and oh my, right?
Yeah, I'm a terrible writer. This is useless. I need to throw it out. I need to tell my editor and my agent that I have to start all over with a brand new plan, and somehow you just keep writing, and you keep going because you know you've done it before. And once you have the book, you can fix it.
Yeah, I think that for me, I mean, yeah, that is my answer actually. That when the editor says that, but no, what happens to me a lot is that I'll write and then I realize, oh, I want this other twist. Like I realize that there's something I was writing toward that I just didn't see. That certainly happened. It certainly happened in The Savage Kind and Dodging Burning. This one, the twist was a psychological one. That I knew all the other twists before I started writing it. But I think that realizing that I have to go back and figure that out, like this, okay, I want to do this. This is what has to be done. And then pulling the thing apart, it's just, you pull a thread. It's like, and the whole thing kind of falls apart. And you're like, now I have a mess. Don't like that feeling.
I think that's one of the most fun things about doing historical mysteries, though, in particular, because the idea that you hear mystery authors throw around all the time is like, oh, if you're stuck, just put another dead body in there. And that does help. But when you're writing historical...
Agatha Christie, she did the same thing. So
when you're doing historical mysteries, you also have all this like research and historical events and weird historical facts to pull on. So if you need some kind of twist, you can be like, all right, what is the weirdest thing that happened in this year or in this city at this point in time? And you can throw that in there and see if it makes a difference and see if it helps things out. And so it gives you a lot of material to pull from to try and make it work.
So one of the things that all three of your books have in common is you've got a theme of your main character that doesn't fit in. And I'm sure all of us here, we fit in perfectly, and we're not used to feeling that at all, so we can't.
Sure.
Yeah, we can't figure that one out. So you've got characters that are a different race or a different class or a different sexual orientation than what is everybody else around them in the book. So what is it about your characters not fitting in that compels you to write this character? Sure.
Well, yeah, Phillida Bright is, as I've mentioned, is the housekeeper for Agatha Christie. So she actually kind of straddles a little bit the class line. Also, it's in the 1930s, so the class distinctions were blurring a little. There weren't as many people in service. You know, they were losing that. Although in my series, we just kind of had a lot of servants in there. But so she's often not forced. She's often interviewing people of a higher class when she's trying to solve these mysteries, and it's always a little bit touch and go for her. But she also uses servants in the other homes to tell her what's going on, and they will tell her because they trust her, because she's also a servant, but she's a high-ranking servant. And that's how she sort of doesn't fit in, but does fit in, because she's above all the other servants except the butler, and she's below all of the upper-class people, so she does straddle this line. But the thing about Phillida Bright is she knows her worth, and she doesn't suffer fools gladly, and she's not shy, and she's not retiring, and she pushes the limits as much as possible.
Well, almost all my lead characters are have been othered in some way. They're all marginalized characters. Yeah, it keeps on going off and on. Okay. Oh, that sounds better. I can hear myself now. Yeah, so they're all my characters are marginalized characters. I think that they are really wonderful characters through which to see a crime happen, because they're outsiders. And I think almost every great detective character is an outsider in some way. It sets them outside of the social sort of dynamics, and they can see it with a little more objectivity. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I certainly, among other reasons, that's why they make effective sort of crime-solving characters. I have, of course, social things that I'm investigating in my novels as well, but certainly that makes them good, detectives.
You stole my point. I think there's that sense of being an outsider. I think that does really help, not just in terms of, you're seeing the crime, but you're also overlooked in a lot of situations by the people who think that you don't have anything. You don't have any insight. You don't have any input. You don't have any reason to be there. Whether you're a woman or a queer character or a poor character, I think all the best sleuths are overlooked for some reason, and that's how they're able to find out what they need to know. I think in a lot of our books also, the outsider character is the one who feels the injustice a little bit more. And my Nightingale books, Vivian Kelly she's a working class woman. She's a queer woman. A lot of the people that she knows are working class or poor or immigrants or queer, and they are the people who are targeted and overlooked. So when she sees that happening, she knows what's going on, whereas someone who's in a position of more status or more wealth or more privilege, they're more likely to not even see the injustice inherent in something. And I think that's something that you see in a lot of amateur sleuths in particular, is that they are more likely to register when something is not, when something that is perhaps legal or sanctioned by the law is actually not a just situation.
I wanted to say one more thing, but I can't turn my, oh, there it is. So although Phillida isn't queer herself, she interacts with the butler, who is clearly queer, and also when she's in London, she visits a gay bar and does not tell the policeman, who insists that she tells him everything that she found out. She doesn't tell him about that part of it because she doesn't want to be responsible for bringing a raid down on this secret location. So she specifically hides that information. So an advocate in her own way, I guess, even, because she's been exposed to, she was in the war, she saw everything. They say everything. The servants.
So I cannot stress enough that all three of these books stand alone. You can read any of them, pick them up from whatever order. However, they are all part of a series. So all of you have written series. All of these are part of a series. What is the best or worst part of writing a series? Katharine, let's start with you.
Well, I just finished writing the last book in the series, so I think figuring out how to end it was the worst part for me, because you want to make it really satisfying, and you want to, both for you as the writer and for the characters and for the reader. But I think also the thing that you touched on before is like, well, why is there another dead body?
You know, so when I was rewriting, after I got those editor's notes back on The Savage Kind, that, you know, then I realized what a mess. I started completely rewriting The Savage Kind, making a very different kind of book. And as I was doing that, an interesting thing happened. I realized I had a whole lot more to say about Judy and Philippa, but really just 2 more books worth to say. So I really thought, this is going to be a trilogy. I want to see what they do in the 1950s. I had the idea for Hall of Mirrors, and then I want to see them as the beginning of the 60s, as things are starting to change, and who they are at that point. So that's really fun, and I'm really excited about this sort of idea of real growth and trajectory across the series. I think the hard part is that there's a lot of threads that you have to weave in characters, because they do want the whole, it's not like they are in one world and it stops. These characters continue to influence them throughout the books, and in a way that a reader can, you know, enter the book at any series and kind of see the others as prequels, if you will. So like, I want every story to be whole, you know, but have resonance with all the others. So I think that's the hard part, and it's hard.
I love writing series. It's hard for me to come up with an idea that's not a series. One of the things I love about it is the development of the characters and the other supporting characters, and the development of that world over the series. Yes, there's always a murder investigation that is resolved, but our relationships in our lives, our coworkers, you know, our friends, our lovers, whatever, they follow us. And so I love being able to take more than one book to develop that. And then when I go from one series to the next, it's like putting on a comfortable T-shirt when I slide into that world and I start a new book in that series. You know, I already have the world created. I just get to embellish it more and develop it more. One of the difficult things about writing a series is sometimes it puts people off, because they're like, oh, there's 4 books, I got to read them all, or oh, there's 5, or oh, I got to read them in order. And that's not true, because as we all have said, all of our books are constructed so that they can be read as a standalone. But sometimes people are put off by it. The other thing is, when I have an idea that I want to do, I always have to decide which book, like, do I want to waste it in this book? Or do I want to save this really cool thing to do later on, but maybe I'll never get there? So that's the only other struggle I have, is like, do I want to waste that now?
I love your comment about building the world and the supporting characters, because I think that's one of the best parts of building a series. And it also makes writing the rest of it easier, because then you have all these characters and these problems and relationships to pull, and you're like, well, I need something bad to happen, so just going to use this person who you met last book and put them in a sticky situation in this one. And
100%.
It's so fun.
Yes, that's what makes it fun. And that's what gets readers to come back. They get invested. Hopefully you all get invested.
Yeah.
I've got a million more questions, but I think y'all do too. So who has a question for these authors about these books, or anything we talked about, or something about trade? Yes.
I write under Colleen Gleason. That's really the only other name. CM Gleason is now Colleen Cambridge. Okay. Colleen Gleason, Colleen Cambridge. You could go to my website.com. Either one, it's all the same. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm curious to know your favorite mystery writer and the favorite book that they wrote.
Well, you know, they have to talk about each other now.
Besides my esteemed panel members, obviously Agatha Christie is one of my favorites. J.D. Robb is one of my favorites. I reread her all the time. But Elizabeth Peters / Barbara Michaels is my all-time favorite. I see a fist pump back there. And you know, you mentioned Death on the Nile, and one of my absolute all-time favorite books is Night Train to Memphis by Elizabeth Peters. Yep. And that is an homage to Death on the Nile, and it's one of those where you think you know what's going on, but oh my gosh, right? Yeah, so.
Oh, that's hard to pick one. So I'm going to pick the... I know. That's right.
Well,
You didn't. You cheated.
no, come on. They ask us this question all the time, John. Come on.
I know. Patricia Highsmith, I think, the talented Mr. Ripley. I just feel like she captures that queasy, tense place between a villain and a protagonist, and I think certainly Judy, to a certain degree, is based on Tom Ripley in a very different angle, but that kind of, do we believe? Are we going on this this character, or how? We are, but should we? It seems dangerous.
Oh gosh, it is a really hard question to answer. I think my favorite mystery author is always the one that I most recently read and went, how'd they do it when I got to the end. So two that I'm really, really loving right now. Nekeza Afia writes beautiful mystery set in the 1920s also. I think her third one just came out last year. Very, very fun series. The first one is called Dead, Dead Girls, which I love that title so much. And then Sherry Thomas writes a Sherlock Holmes homage series. I see some applause back there. And it's a gender bent Sherlock Holmes, where Sherlock Holmes is actually a young woman named Charlotte Holmes, who, because it's Victorian England, cannot solve crimes on her own. So she has a fictional bedridden invalid genius brother named Sherlock, and she interprets for him to the public.
So I saw a question over here. Yes, ma'am.
Your research, the history, so you have the story, you have the history. How do you kind of weave and pick out what parts of history to weave into?
We leave out way more than we'd like to, I think. I think anyone who writes historical mysteries is a huge history nerd and would just put all the fun historical details in there if we could. So we have our editors telling us, like, you've got to trim it out. But I think the weaving it together, the world, we talked about the world of that we're building with our characters, but you also have that historical world, and that shapes what those characters can do, or what social norms they're going to butt up against, or why they might be in danger, or why someone they love might be in danger. So it all really fuels, all of it fuels each other. Like, it becomes part of the mystery in a lot of really wonderful ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of research, there's sort of two tiers. One is what I call the research of verisimilitude, which is, the clothing and the cars and the sort of the living spaces, the everyday stuff, which I actually find really fascinating. At 3 different time periods for my novels because I wanted the characters to change clothes and have different style. And now I get to describe the early 60s. It's so fun. Anyway, so I think that's a lot of fun. But then they have this sort of very important, historical elements, like the McCarthy-era post-war period in D.C. Is it dying again? Yeah. The post-war era and the McCarthy era were very interesting to me because of how it shaped their characters. So any events that might in some way shape a character need to come in somehow. But they need to be discovered naturally through that character. You don't want to pause and lecture to your reader about the McCarthy era. You have to find a way to weave it in. So I think that's the trick, to figure that out. And then anything that doesn't apply or shape character, that needs to probably cut.
I mean, Katharine, you said it perfectly. I mean, everything just kind of weaves together, all of the parts of it. And I think of it in 2 ways. I think of it as the macro world, like that overarching, the political environment, and then the micro world, which is like everything drilled down, did they use lipstick, or did they call it nail varnish, or whatever, those little things. So again, it is inherently part of the story, and that's right. We're all major history nerds, and you get this much of the research in our books. The rest of it is up here. And we'll talk about it forever if we get going.
But it's so fun to do all that extra research because you never know what's going to be useful for the next book.
Right.
That's where you get so many of your ideas.
And that's why I would never use a research assistant, because I got to find, I don't know what I'm looking for half the time. And my research, I could never have a research assistant because you find those gems.
I have a little story about that in particular. So in this book, when I was outlining, I had one sentence for a single scene that I knew needed to happen. It was, Vivian discovers this information. And I had no idea where she was going to discover it, how she was going to discover it. I thought it would be a little throwaway scene. but I didn't know where it was going to happen, and I could not figure it out until I was researching and discovered this giant event that happened in New York City every year in the 1920s and 1930s. It actually started in the 1880s, but it reached its height in the 1920s and 30s, and it was a giant drag ball that happened in Harlem every year, and it was a masquerade. And so it's all these people in costumes and masks from basically every social level in New York. People would travel from all over the country. It was a big gathering for LGBTQ folks from all over the US. And I was like, well, now I know where that's going to happen. And it became this giant multi-chapter set piece of that grounds the entire middle of the book. And I never would have found it if I hadn't been just reading random newspapers from the 1920s.
That serendipitous stuff is just what makes it so much fun.
Now I want to find out where this party is. Do we have some more questions? Yes.
Nope.
Boo.
Nope. No, not interested. Well, what are you asking? Well, we're not interested in it happening, I guess. I mean, I'm not. I don't think anybody on this panel.
To be honest with you, it's going to write crappy mysteries. I'm also a teacher and instructor, and I see the crappy papers that some of our students are having AI create. And it's flat affect and does not know how to synthesize information very well. Now, it could get smarter. It is getting smarter. I do think there's some questions that the publishing industry and we as writers have to face about some of this. But I think right now what's being produced, and there is, you can find this crappy AI mysteries on Amazon. You can find anything on Amazon. But I think that doesn't mean that I really do believe there's something about the human touch and the human experience that is too various for AI to capture. So in terms of very mid-range kind of churned out stuff, maybe it will eventually replace that, but not the kind of quality, certainly not the kind of quality you have up here.
I think it's also important, this one? Okay, I think it's also important to remember that when we say generative AI, it's not a creative thing, actually. It's a predictive text machine that isn't making up anything new, so it can't reach the creativity and that the emotion that an actual human writing can reach, because it just doesn't have it. It's just predicting what word is likely to come next based on what someone else has already made.
Which, by the way, there's a huge scandal right now with all.
Oh, that's big right now.
All of our books. I guarantee all of our books.
Oh, yeah, sure.
There was a huge theft of intellectual property and books. The story broke yesterday, I believe. And it was actually Facebook stole tens of thousands of books to teach their AI how to write books. So if you wonder why you say AI and we all get very upset, we spend a lot of time working on our craft, and to find that someone has just stolen them and is using them to compete with us, we're not going to be very happy. Happier question, please. We have time for about one more question. Yes.
In fiction, movies, and television, serial killers are convicted. There may even be some in this room.
Some research.
I'm not going out with him
afterwards. We get it out all on the page. We don't do it in real life.
No.
In the real world, they are statistically insignificant. Is this, in the world where distinction between fact and fiction and trust of our fellow humans is, not really going so well? For society, we think they're serial murderers.
So in case you did not hear that, the question is, there's serial killers that we hear a lot about in the media and in books and in movies, but it doesn't seem to be that there's actually that many serial killers in the world. So what is it about the serial killers? Can you repeat that last sentence, please?
Is it good for us as a society to have this, serial killers everywhere?
Okay, is it good for us as a society to have this serial killer boogeyman everywhere?
Well, a serial killer, I mean, technically, yes, is someone who kills more than once. But I would say in most of my mysteries, I don't have what one would call a serial killer. They kill first for some reason, then they usually kill once or twice afterward, depending how many bodies I want to put in the book. Usually to protect themselves, not because they're on this ramp. You know what I mean? There's like a difference between, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer and a person who, you know, kills their grandfather for his fortune and then kills the maid who saw him do it. You know what I mean? So I don't really have any serial killers. And also that term wasn't even coined, so I can't even, I start to slip once in a while. I want to use a serial killer, that term, and it wasn't even until like the 60s, I think. Yeah, and so I have to say series of murders. I have to say something like that.
I mean, I think part of the fascination is because it's not something that we all encounter in our real lives, like, and we all know that. Like, I don't think most of us are going around saying, like, "Oh, I bet my neighbor has 5 dead bodies buried in their backyard."
Speak
I mean,
for
I guess
yourself.
if you go on next door, you might be a little concerned. But I think it's, you know, the idea that, because even if you just have like one murder in your book, most of us will never encounter a murder in our lives. Thank God. So I think it's this fascination with something that is so outside of our experience and that we know is very outside of our experience. And you wonder, you know, as we talked in the first question, what would drive someone to do that? And it's, you know, it's those sense of extremes. I think everyone is intrigued by extremes. And if you get it out in a book or listening to a podcast or watching a true crime documentary, that's a very healthy way to explore that fascination, as opposed to, yes.
You know, I want to add on one other thing, because I think it's more than just about, what is it with, okay, maybe it's my voice. I don't like my voice. I actually think it's more than just about serial killers. I think a serial killer is a sort of symbol for something that we don't understand doing harm to us. It's like, I always think about, you know, natural disasters as a sort of another version of that. But it's something that we can't control, that we can't, you know, do anything about. We don't fully understand why it's happening. And that something about putting that in a mystery and solving it, and you know, at least getting this one bad guy under control, feels satisfying. So I think part of this fascination with serial killers is that it's really about us processing what we can't control in our lives.
So we're about out of time, and Colleen had asked for a lightning round.
I did not ask for a lightning round. I said, please don't give us a lightning round. Dang it. Sorry, I screeched.
And we're going to start with
Oh, of course we are.
what is next for you?
Oh, that's easy.
Next.
Oh, what's next is the third book in my An American in Paris mystery series, which is called A Fashionably French Murder, which will be out at the end of April, and it takes place in 1950s Paris, and it's all about haute couture, and of course there's dead bodies all over the place. And then the 5th book in this series will be out in October. So, there you go.
What's two things next for me? Can you guys hear me okay? One is actually a collection of crime fiction that I'm editing called Crime Inc. It's a collection of queer crime stories. So it's all these different fabulous gay, lesbian, queer authors, all different styles, from noir to cozy to police procedural. And so I'm really excited about that. And then, of course, the third in the trilogy, Goddess of Love, is something I'm currently working on, and will be out, you know, in a year or two.
I have a new book coming out this summer. It's called Last Dance Before Dawn, and it is the 4th and final Nightingale mystery. And that'll be June, 17th. I'm looking at you like you know what date my book is coming out.
Actually, I have it pre-ordered. It is June, so.
Oh, okay, thank you. June 17th. So, yeah, I have postcards about that if anyone wants to grab one of those while we're doing our signing.
So we will now all have the opportunity to purchase books. There are some books back here, and get them signed by these wonderful authors. And let's see, please be mindful of our authors' time and those around you who also would like to get their book signed, but they would like to talk to everybody. And also, before we go, we'd like to ask for your feedback on this panel and the festival in general. Your feedback helps ensure we offer the best programming possible to all of our audience members. We ask that you please take a moment to complete the survey using the QR code in the back